Political analyst and journalist Javed Rana is now joining us from the Pakistani capital. Javed, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Javed, we've seen how the Turkish government has been talking to leaders from all across the world. And the most important thing that we must realize right now is Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan's visit to Russia. He has met President Putin, Medinsky, who's the lead negotiator, and his counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. How are you looking at this development, Javed? And what do you think the Turkish government is doing at this point? Is it doing the right thing to, in order to establish a ceasefire? In which direction is the Turkish government going with this war?
I think before that, we have to see it in a broader context, which is that the US has failed in enforcing a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. That is a part of the reason. And now it looks like Donald Trump sounded very frustrated when he said that Putin has gone crazy. He's not listening to me, despite the fact that he had a 2 hours long discussions with him over phone. And he's doing something which was not very much to the spirit of the discussion that he had with him. So I think in that context, these are the renewed efforts on the part of the Turkey. And Turkey already, basically, you may recall, I think 2 developments we have to see in the background. The recent mediation efforts, arbitration efforts, which could not take off, unfortunately. And then just after this war, when it had started off back in 2022, I think Turkey put a lot of weight in this conflict in terms of resolving it in a peaceful manner. And I think this latest attempt is more important. Turkey is, in a way, a kind of a bridge between the 2 extreme approaches, which is the Europe and the Russia. And so far as US role is concerned, I find it more as an opportunist. The US is looking for rare earths under Donald Trump's presidency, something they've been saying it. Donald Trump was insulting Ukrainian president, but when he bribed him that the rare earth agreement would be there in case you enforce some kind of ceasefire agreement with Russia and settlement of this war. Again, in that context, I think Turkey's perspective is different. It understands that these war theaters needs to be winded down, and like in a manner that Turkey did it in Syria, and in a similar fashion, Turkey wants some kind of a settlement of this issue. Because Turkey is not a kind of a player which has any vested political interest. It has a genuine security concern in the Black Sea. And I think out of those concerns, these are the renewed efforts. But we have to also see a bigger picture. The bigger picture is that the Russian President Putin is the most manipulative player in this entire conflict. He's not considering anything now at a time when Donald Trump basically is desensitizing this war theater all over the world in a manner that people are not taking him very serious. So he understands that the Americans have already stopped funding this war, funding Ukraine, and therefore he can occupy as much as territory he can occupy, and that is exactly what he has been doing it. 20% Ukraine's territory already under the hold of Russia, and if you include Crimea, which was previously taken over by Russia, it's at 27%. And I think there are apprehensions, and some genuine apprehensions, that probably this 27% may go up to 50%. Because if you look at the mindset of the President Putin, he believes that Ukraine is historically part of Russia and should be a part of Russia. Now, the international pressure is not there. So having a permanent deal between Ukraine and Russia at this particular point of time, it looks like something easier said than done.
Javed, let's talk about the Gaza issue because during the press conference yesterday, Hakan Fidan and Sergei Lavrov both stressed on the need for a ceasefire in the occupied Gaza Strip, and both condemned the Israeli actions. And we've been seeing what is happening in the occupied Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours with that humanitarian aid. So how are you looking at Russia's role? You know, has Russia taken enough stance in stopping the war? How are you analyzing Russia's stance on the war in Gaza?
I think no country has benefited more than Russia out of this conflict in terms of exploiting it to let the West and let everybody else in the world to know that Israel's key ally, the USA and the West, they all have been talking about that it was a Russian aggression on Ukraine. But as a matter of fact, when they look at what Israel has done with the backing of the West, then the aggression of Russian president in Ukraine, that looks like a very small. In that context, I think that was a bigger benefit to Russian president. He was declared as a war criminal. There was arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. But when similar situation happened in Gaza at a far larger scale, we have seen that again it was the West itself which sanctioned. I'm talking about the U.S. It sanctioned the International Criminal Court. It sanctioned its officials and bullied them and cornered them. So again, this helped Russia basically to do whatever it wants to do with the Ukraine, which is not a militarily powerful country. So whatever the statement Russia has been giving on Gaza, I do not take it very seriously because Russia has an interest in the Middle East. Russia wants to maintain its military bases in the Middle East. And Turkey is trying to play a role where it can navigate in so far as the interest of the West and so far as the interest of the Russians are concerned in a manner that is acceptable to all parties.
Javed, let's go back to the European stance, because yesterday Sergei Lavrov stressed on the fact that the European Union is not taking this issue seriously. He said that the European Union is using this war for its own personal benefits. How are you analyzing this statement by the Russian foreign minister?
Well, I think everything is in the disarray now because when USA has abandoned Ukraine in terms of not providing the high-tech weapons, and now it is Ukraine which is depending altogether on Germany, on France, and the UK, who've been providing them the weapons. Now they have also announced that they are going to provide long-range weapons. I think that is from Russia's perspective, and also I think the Turkish foreign minister has also voiced his concern that this could possibly lead towards a kind of a nuclear conflict in months or in years to come if the situation persists like this. Because long-range weapons means that there may be long-range missiles which Ukraine would be using to target deep inside Russia. So this conflict could prolong. And I think at this particular point of time, when regional countries like Turkey, when the USA, they are all ready to help Russia to go for some kind of a negotiated settlement, which obviously my understanding is that now Ukraine is more inclined to withdraw its candidacy to become a member of the NATO. And I think probably it would not have much interest to become the member of the European Union. But again, the problem here is that how much territory Russia is going to retain and how much territory it is going to give in. So that is a critical question, and that is where Russian president, who is a KGB spy, he's got a very manipulative skills, and I think he is comprehensively exploiting everybody in the region and in the world. He's outsmarting everyone, and I think now his tactics looks like more meaningfully visible, and the European countries are feeling very, very frustrated. And so far as the US president is concerned, we cannot take him much serious. But again, he is also feeling very frustrated in this situation.
Javed, my final question is for you. Now, yesterday, Lavrov said that, they're having a good conversation, they're having peaceful conversations with the United States, and, they're close to, achieving a deal. What that deal incorporates, we do not know. But he said that the EU wants to damage our negotiation process. Considering the differences between Trump and the European Union, do you think that President Trump could abandon this plan entirely?
I don't think he would abandon the plan, because he sounded frustrated, and Moscow has not taken him seriously. That's why we have not heard a very strong wording from Moscow. And Moscow said essentially that it was an emotional overload. Because Moscow is trying to play it down. Now the problem with the Europe is that it has lost the war. It used tactics to basically to weaken militarily Russia, economically weaken Russia. That did not happen. It has in fact turned out to be counterproductive. Now in a kind of a frustration, it is providing weapons, but again, it doesn't have the much capacity to continue the supplies of these weapons. And then it doesn't have that kind of the intelligence resources. It doesn't have that kind of high-tech facilities with which it can sustain this war. On the other hand, the US has that capacity, and the US has, by and large, withdrawn its support. So therefore, Putin is expecting that at the end of the day, Donald Trump is going to put enough pressure on Ukrainian president, and then there would be a deal, and that deal would be largely on the terms and the conditions that Moscow would lay down.
Javed Rana, thank you for being on the program. It was a pleasure having you.
The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point, and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legalism on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geo-strategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geo-strategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.